I have a slide, and the image is sort of something. I'm teaching a current art class right now, and my students know my current obsession with Andy Warhol, and it surprised me. So speaking of serendipity, but the reason I'm sharing this slide is obvious, right? I don't know how many of you are familiar with this amazing ice cream bar in New York City. But it's a place that very much exists today, and it existed already in the 60s, and it happens to be one of Andy Warhol's early venues, where he exhibited his work in the early 60s when he was still unknown, sort of 20 years old, super talented, working in the commercial sphere. Anyway, nothing to do with our wonderful artists who are going to be talking today, but I did want to share because of the venue here, Serendipity 3. But I can see the artists are all here. Hi, guys. I'm so happy to see you. So, hi. I was just going to give you a little art history, just 3 minutes, because I am an art historian and I couldn't resist the temptation. So I gave you Warhol. I'm going to give you a few images. And as I caught sight of my first slide here earlier, I thought, oh, I should have made this into a quiz because then it would have been even more interactive, right? But I did want to share a few images from art history of illustrating this idea of how chance has long played a role in art making. So starting in the 18th century, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with cousins, but, and you might not believe it when you look at this image, but it was produced starting with a blot. And Cousins, who later published a pamphlet, or he published a pamphlet on this method of drawing landscapes from blots in 1785, imagine that, very early, he defined the blot as a production of chance with a small degree of design. I just love that. And I thought that should be our starting point for our conversation today, bringing it back to the 18th century. But here's our second image, and there will just be 4 of these, I promise. It's not going to take long. But during the early decades of the 20th century, Jean Arp, an artist affiliated with the Dada movement, as you all know, created various compositions which he called according to the laws of chance. And so here's one from the collection in New York, the Metropolitan, the MoMA, excuse me. And it was created in 1917 and just involved the artist dropping pieces of colored paper onto a sheet, another sheet, and then he fixed them in that location that they fell. Our next image is a surrealist. I had to mention a surrealist. Surrealists like André Masson created images, continued opening art up to accident and randomness, adopting new techniques. And here you see one of André Masson's automatic drawings. So produced very much on instinct. And my last image, coming from art history, is I had to talk about Swiss art as well. This is one of the preeminent Swiss artists living and working in Geneva today, and this painting was made by pouring paint and other materials onto the canvas, that is to say, completely intuitively. So, my speedy survey now complete. Let's turn our attention to the real stars of the day, who are these 3 artists who will be speaking to us about serendipity and its role in their art making. So they're very different. I'm showing their featured artworks that they'll be speaking about today in this slide all together. So don't worry if you can't make sense of what's going on here and who made what. All will be revealed in a few minutes. But all this I just want to introduce a few things. So as you can see, we're talking about very different artworks here, different materials. And if they do share one thing in common, it's that all of them work with the natural world in mind. And also, all of them are members of the Webster family, as they have participated or will participate, hint, hint, Francisca, in the Meet the Artist lecture and podcast series, which has existed since 2018. And I'd love to share links to those websites in the chat. I will do so a little bit later when I'm finished introducing. But I do want to introduce our panelists. our panelists. So starting with James Lang, whose work you can see here. James Lang has been making art since the early 80s. He has an MFA from Pratt University in New York, where he trained as a bronze sculptor and a ceramicist. And when he's not in the studio making art or giving courses, he is writing stories, as he's also a writer. He has had shows in France, Germany, and Switzerland, and he has shown his work on Webster's campus during Creativity Week in 2019. And James, please do share your links, links to your sculpture studio and your website if you want to in the chat, please.
Sure, I'll put it in the chat. Sure, thank you.
Great, perfect. And our next artist of the day is Asthildur Jonsdottir. I'm working on my Icelandic together, right? I'm getting better and better. She is an artist, researcher, curator, and art teacher. She has a PhD from the University of Iceland and a Doctor of Arts from the University of Lapland. Her approach as an artist is community-based and strongly connected with the idea of sustainability. In April 2019, Asta led a wonderful collaborative environmental project on Webster's campus, and some 40 students and staff participated in that. I don't have an image of it here, but I might find one by the end of this talk, if you give me a few more minutes. And lastly, we have Francisca Lauber, who is a video and installation artist working in the field of human-animal research. She has a BA in Fine Art from the University of the Arts in Bern and an MA of Arts in Public Spheres from the ICAV in Sierre, Switzerland. She has had solo exhibitions in Switzerland and the UK and many group shows. She is a member of SARN, which is an acronym for Swiss Artistic Research Network, and the founder of the group Sense of Forest, Sense of Place, on the possibility of perception as an artistic research method in the eco and energetic system forest. And Francisca, I look forward to recording a podcast with you very soon, as I have done with Asta and James. So just before I give you the floor, the panel will be formatted as an interactive thing. I mean, it doesn't look like it so far, but I promise you this is supposed to be a conversation, right, with all of you in the audience. I have some questions prepared, but do not hesitate to raise your hand at any time, and we can just have a conversation about anything that comes to mind. I can throw my questions at the window. It's really not a big deal. We will make this happen so that it's as interactive as possible. I hope that sounds good. I will stop sharing, and so I'll let the rest of you sort of share slides. Whenever you want to bring something up, please do that. But let me just start it off with a first knee-jerk reaction question. If I say to you friend or foe, talking about chance, do you say friend or foe? Francisca, what do you think? Friend or foe? Is chance a friend or a foe?
It's a friend, definitely.
Okay. Asta?
I would say friend also.
And James?
Yeah, I don't think we could participate here if we didn't say friend.
Okay, so you're all allies of chance, which is a great thing to know about you all. So, you know, you're a highly diverse group of artists. You're all working with different materials. And so I really wanted to maybe start talking about materials and your approach to materials and what that really means, because some of you work with ceramics. James works with ceramics, but Asta works with people, for example, right? So the way we think of materials is so different between you. So let's talk about materials and maybe this question of control or agency on the one hand, and this thing we call chance and the incursions of chance on the other. So if I could start with James, and I see James is in his studio, which is super cool. You can all see his work behind him. How cool is that?
So thanks for having me, Julianna. And yeah, it's a quick look from my studio. I'm usually on the other side of the table. You would just see my kiln, but this is a peep of my studio. Since I like explaining things in narrative forms, I have a small story to tell to answer that question. let me first see if I can share the screen, because I have a number of images I'd like to share with you guys. And if it works, let's see. Starting from here, can you guys see?
Yeah, we can.
You can see.
Yes.
Okay, but it should be like this. Is that better? That's better.
Perfect.
Okay. So this conference is really speaking about serendipity during the time of COVID, and I think this is an important image for me and how it affected the choice of my materials, because they all did start here. This is a view from, not from my studio or my atelier, but from my home. So I've got this balcony, and I put out a bird feeder, and for many days, many weeks, many months, I observed the birds eating. And sometimes they were eating jovially, sometimes they were bickering and fighting each other. But it was you know, lively. It's like the few animated moments I would have, and mostly in the morning. You know, you go put out the food, and they just would come down. They wouldn't be afraid of me anymore, and that was my daily ritual. At the same time, I'm showing you this. This is a view of the entrance of our grand mansion, and you can see here an old gate. And for many years, we thought of changing this gate because it's extremely narrow and extremely difficult to enter. And we finally, during COVID, got it together, and I actually made a design with my architect wife to change this gate. And if we look at the detail here of this gate, unbeknownst to many, you have, if you're looking at the arrow, an element which is embedded into the concrete, which is a gate stopper. I don't know in fact the technical term, but this piece allows the gates to shut properly, and there you go. And when the gate was taken out, it looked like this. It was actually quite a large piece, and I found it curious, and I kept looking at it, and then I ended up cutting it. You can see it cut, and then there it was. This was maybe the serendipitous moment. I saw a nose, a beak. I saw something that was very stimulating, and it got me going. But it didn't happen right away. I would walk down the streets because we had the curfew and the lockdown. So I'd walk down the streets alone every day, and very much like I would say Don Quixote maybe, and without Sanchez, I'd walk down and I'd look at these old gate stoppers and almost marvel over them, finding them excited that somehow there's this nose or something that's embedded there and not seen by anybody. So I got going on my project, and you showed earlier the finished project. This was an earlier stage as I'm sculpting it, and yeah, we can say that it was because of the circumstances and the experience, subconscious maybe, that was going on from the bird feeder. But also then I realized there was yet another story about this nose, and the fact that during this pandemic, which is not yet over, we're all, I'm sorry, I'm a bit ahead of myself. We're all, I was going to say, wearing masks, but I forgot about this second little project. And this is a bucket flower pot that I also made at around the same time as the Birdman. And you can see it's got a nice little bird there on its rim. But if you look closely, there is a story there, because I am often a storyteller. So there's a little moth or a little insect on the outside of this decorative feature, and it got away. It's the one that got away. So that's the cute little story. And yeah, this is the period again of the mask, and we are all carrying these masks, which means our noses are all covered. We are in a noseless period, we could say. And Julianna, you brought up the great play by Gogol, The Nose, and I thought that was also great. The fact that this character one day wakes up and his nose has decided to leave him, and in some ways we're living very much this moment also of not having noses. So imagine plastic surgeons who are on the dole today because they have no work, and then we're going to soon come back to our noses, hopefully soon, but it is going to be traumatic. It is, I think, already traumatic. This, of course, I'm separating the nose, the mouth. Maybe next year we can do the mouth, Julianna. But I think that is a confluence of things that, for me, got me going. And I'll conclude with this little image of a sculpture of a cow that I made much earlier, but I just put it. I put a mask on it. It's right over there. And in fact, a lot of people, they walk by and they get a kick out of it because the cow's wearing a mask.
Thanks, James, for telling us a little bit more about how serendipity has a role to play, because given that you were trained as a bronze sculptor, I mean, bronze and serendipity don't seem to really mesh that well, right? I mean, we might get a reaction of, oh, well, how could that work? Given the, given the heaviness and the logistics of working in such heavy materials, right? And even ceramics that involve so much technical skill, coloring, glazing, etc., right? So serendipity might not come to mind immediately. So it's really interesting to hear you tell the story of how serendipity had an effect there.
Yeah, there would be another story to bronze if you want to focus on bronze. I actually did use techniques with wax where you pour the wax on top of water, which creates a very irregular surface. And so there is the chance of what you get from that. That's another story.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to talk about that sometime. Maybe not right now. I'd like to hear, maybe Asta, could you tell us about the work you've created? Because I just flashed it very quickly for everybody, and I'd love to hear you.
For me, the slide that I sent you, just go back to that.
Sure. So give me a second, and then I can, I guess, zoom into it so that we can take a look at the details there.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go for it.
The question is for Jamezola. I hope I pronounced it well.
It's James.
Okay,
that's my
so
my students know who I am.
I think your work is not common, but it's pretty nice. Like I think it's special, I would say. Where do you get your inspiration from?
Well, as I mentioned, this Birdman gatekeeper, I think, and the flower bucket with the birds. I think these beaks, these noses, even behind me, maybe you can see there's another figure. So it's more human-like, but it's got a large nose now. So I'm in this nose face. I like delving into series. I think the stories affect me deeply. I believe in them. I think I use personification a lot. So when you get going on a sculpture, they actually are asking you, to continue to go further. And if you play that out, it gives you a lot of ideas and inspiration.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alexia. So, Asta.
Yes.
Here it is.
Okay. So I'm a conceptual artist, and for those that don't know what that means, it means that in my art I focus more about the concept behind the work than necessarily the methods I'm using. So it really depends of the method, each project, what method I'm using. And quite often I work on site-specific exhibitions, like the work that I'm working on now that you see here in the slide. It's an exhibition that will open on June 19th, so I'm kind of in the middle of finishing. But when I work on a site-specific places, I place myself into the social history of the place. I try to look at myself kind of as a troubleshooter, if you could say so. And I look at issues with a new pair of eyes, a new set of categories, and try to show an interest in social, political, and natural ecologies of the place. So I do a lot of digging and I speak to the people of the place. And this particular place is that you see in this gallery, you see it in the upper left corner of the slide. It's in the Westfjords of Iceland, in a small isolated fishing village where a lot of artists have now kind of bought up the houses because the fishing village have almost been deserted because there is no right longer there to fish the fish. And when I'm working on exhibitions like this, I try to find connections between things that is so important and often, I think, missed out in our cultures. And this installation is entitled Genius Loci, and it is a phrase that comes from Latin, and it's a place where it's a phrase that includes the essence of a place. And in my art processes, it's a combination of creativity, openness, and curiosity. Since I work with places and people in the places, I have to be open, and it's a great serendipity what comes to me. And in a way, it was a serendipity that I was offered to show in this gallery, because it was just through dialogue of common interest, equal fairness, etc., that I kind of was asked to exhibit there. And I'm part of SARN like Francisca, and we are together in this research group, but I have been using artistic research for many years in my practice. It took me many years to complete my PhD, where I was looking at the potential of art in education for sustainability and through artistic research. And I think it is the key for my work is being curious and kind of using the serendipity, this happy accident that I kind of am constantly coming across. In this, maybe I should just, because in this installation I'm using different methods. And I'm using the kind of metaphor of the golden egg. I don't know if you know the story of the golden eggs, and it's about the goose that laid golden eggs, and it's one of Aesop's fables. And it's a story of a farmer who was hoping to become rich all at once, and he harms the goose that laid one golden egg every day because he wanted to have many of them. But when he opened the goose, of course, there were no eggs there. He had to be patient and wait for the eggs. And the moral of this story is that too much greed always leads to some sort of downfall or loss. In Iceland, Iceland is one of the largest fisheries nations in the North Atlantic and is very proud of its reputation of sustainable fisheries. The former inhabitant of this gallery, this old house that has now been bought by a curator and that has this gallery there, he was called Geiri. And the image you see in the left corner is of him, and it's a transfer I made of him with he was a fisherman his whole life. He owned a small coastal boat, and as a volunteer, he worked for the union, fighting for the rights of people working in the fish factory. But in order to secure sustainable fisheries, the government in Iceland introduced a system of transferable fishing quota in the mid-80s. And it is a great system for the industry because there is no overfishing and the stock really maintains itself. But the problem is that as it is transferable quota, some people became greedier than others. So from this, the owner of the quota in this village, which was kind of by accident, by a serendipity, he kind of was the one that had the fish factory at that time when they decided to introduce the quota. He sold the quota out of the village. And this is something not that is only happening in Iceland. Many of the South American countries have even sold their quota outside of the country. But in Iceland, our problem is there are only now few companies that own the whole fishing quota, and in a way that is not very sustainable for a cultural aspect of sustainability, even though from the natural perspective and the economical perspective that is much more sustainable. There has been overall economic gains of this fishing quota, but there have both been winners and losers. And this village where I'm installing this work, they were losers because they lost the quota, and the right to fish is the golden egg. So if you sell it, so you see the 3 solar prints in the middle, which are prints that are made of the, like this one here with the golden egg in the middle is the triangle of capitalism. So one of the corners is the natural resources that one could say that it says you can face a serendipity when you discover a natural resource within your surroundings. And one of it is then the greed, which leads to the one of kind of selling the quota in hope for becoming richer but it means that for the future generations, there are only broken golden eggs left. So what they need to do now is to find new ways of looking into what does the village have to offer? How can we, because there is no way to find, they will not get new quota because we cannot overfish. In Þingeyri, this village, there were many people working in the fish factory, and now the conveyor belts have become silent, and the people there, it is more and more like a touristic place where people are using their kind of the houses and the buildings as a kind of summer houses. And then that is people that have, of course, more money than the average people that would live in a village like this. And later this summer, I will have a participatory event in the village, which involves the search for new golden eggs. And this is what I also try to do in installations like that. I try to include the people of the location, and where I have been showing, for example, in Orkney Islands, I managed to work with the knitting club of Orkney Islands, and I try to kind of find groups that are kind of have a special interest and they kind of have a network. And therefore, serendipity is crucial for me to kind of find the right people to work with. But to have a hunt for a new golden eggs, it's also kind of gives me the chance to discuss with the participant how to notice or discover happy or unexpected potential by accident. Because sometimes you need the chance, but it's also you need to kind of be open and curious and have to dare to come up with new ideas. And in case of this exhibition, it is an international exhibition, which gives me a chance to work with, it's located in few places in Iceland, on the west first of Iceland, and it gives me the chance to kind of reflect on what the others are doing, which are also, most of them are conceptual artists working with some kind of ecological issues. But when I work on a project like this, I take a long time. I have been working on this for 2 years now, this installation. And I have done many trials and many things. I have spoken to the inhabitants. I have already had all kinds of art workshops and artistic actions within the village. And I have read and kind of written a story of this former owner of the house and the story of the quota system and how it in fact affected this place. And it has been for me for a long time important to constantly come across happy discoveries and to meet people that have the same interest and have the interest in equal rights and fair kind of that we distribute the natural resources that we have in Iceland in a fair way. And I have unexpectedly found knowledge in places I did not expect. And I have also come across different materials, like you see the frame in the lower left corner. That is, you see the passepartout is in a form of an egg, which is a great coincidence because I'm using this metaphor of the golden egg. And that I found here in the flea market in Geneva, which was a great happy chance for me. And we could also think of kind of this man, this fisherman, as maybe the human spirits are the real golden eggs that we should be looking at. What do we have to offer as human? And what can we have? What can open mind lead us to if we are willing to take the risk? And serendipity definitely plays a role in my practice and my everyday life. And as I said earlier, and as Julianna told earlier, I often do participatory artworks. And in participatory art, serendipity is the key. And it's not only important to me, but all other artists that are expecting others to kind of contribute to the artworks that they are creating. But if you don't know what participatory art is, it originates from the relationship between humans and the social context of creating art. In the participatory approach, the audience is engaging directly in the creative process, the artist is then allowing members of the audience or the visitors to become co-authors or editors or observer of the work. And that always includes some kind of a chance, what will happen. It can have you kind of play with that. Participatory art works have the potential to create a dynamic collaboration between the artist and the audience and their environment. And it most of the time creates a very interesting dialogue. And I always like to think of the artist as an agent of change. Some kind of a creative voice, which has the essential for shifting consciousness. Kind of hopefully with this installation in the Westfjords, people will start to rethink the fairness of the distribution of the fishing quota. Yeah, well, I think we should care for things like this because it governs the future life of our society. I think that is pretty much.
Thank you for explaining this slide, which has so many parts. I wanted to insist that this is not the artwork, right? What we see here, but we see various images that correspond to various stages of the creative process, right? So that's important to understand. Thank you, Asta. Let's now hear from Francisca. What are your materials? Tell us about this elderberry juice, which some people might remember from that early slide I showed. Tell us about that. Tell us about your working materials and tell us about what all this has to do with chance.
Yeah, actually, I like a lot of artists. I have a research idea, and I try to look for material that fits with this idea. And so I have to search for, go into it actually with a bit of braveness and experimental also. And with this work, I can maybe also show not all slides because we have other questions later, but maybe I can a bit tell about the first research and how I have chosen this elderberry juice. And I don't know if anybody knows what elderberry juice is, because I think you didn't know what is the plant elderberry. And I can also talk about this because this is very important for the landscape I created. So this is my slide. So the title is Wind Over Continents, but this is a working title. I'm not sure if I will have this title. Maybe it's the title Lost, because it's about this work. It's about extinct animals and their habitat loss. So the Wind Over Continents, the title refers, I have to read a bit because I'm not so, can't express myself so free, so precise. So when the Europeans began to travel the world with trading ships and from colonies, the landscapes changed rapidly. By hunting extensively animals and using the land for agriculture and for their cattle, they destroyed actually a lot of landscapes and animal habitats until today. This is an ongoing issue. And basically the title refers to the people that came with the wind, with their boats, with their sailing ships, the first people. And it's a kind of, I think about the wind blew the people from the boats and over the country. So that's Wind Over Continents. And it's an ongoing process, and I'm not sure if I will have this installation on the floor. And each landscape is on one eco paper. And one eco paper represents one extinct animal. So this is the elderberry flower first, and then it turns into berries. And this is the bush, actually. And this is the juice I worked with. This is not my image. I just I took it from a website. So what is important about this work is that elderberry is often found near farmhouses, and they are planted to protect the house, its residents, and animals. So this is very important because this is a healing plant. And it has been used for protecting from evil, and it was used for healing and blessings. And they also did hang things, personal things on the bush to have the healing, body healing or house healing. And now it's actually common for to treat cold and flu symptoms. So it's very important for this work that this is a healing plant. And I just can quickly tell about the Latin names I used. I used on each fictional landscape, I created a Latin name of the extinct animal. And this comes from Carl von Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist. I think Julianna, you know him, maybe. And he started to collect plants and gave them Latin names. And the famous book is Systema Naturae. I forgot the A. But this is a Systema Naturae. And the classification was the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the mineral kingdom. And because he used this Latin, I read that this was, he didn't, I have to, sorry. He didn't want to insult any country with their language, and he wanted to use a common language that was actually dead. And nowadays, or then also, it's really a precise name for a species, a plant, a mineral, to name it, and around the globe, you know which plant it is or which animal, and it's not a name from your dialect that you have to explain. So that's because this Latin name, and in my work, it refers to, even me, I don't know anymore what this animal is. So the animal is hidden because we don't see it, and most we don't see wild animals. They are invisible. And the extinct animals, we just can read about them when we search for the internet. So I don't know if I should talk about the process, but in this, I'm going to do this after, but I chose this process of, I can maybe go up. Yeah, this process of uncontrolled, it's not a painting actually, I don't know what it is, of uncontrolled surface to create, because I don't know the landscapes. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know the landscape or the habitat this extinct animal had. And so I wanted to have something that I can't control or that I can partly control. And I really went into this process of try and error. That's it, I think, from my part.
Thanks, Francisca. So we have a few minutes left. I would love to get some questions from the audience. But I mean, what we can do, what I can do is to summarize a little bit, so the audience will realize at this point what I meant by the idea that you work in different ways. So as we heard from Asta, she works with people, responding to place. Francisca shared a little bit about how she works, which is different, and James also. So, you know, I think Asta and Francisca are more ecologically motivated by, you know, not only inspired by the natural world, but also responding to a need to change society, change the way of life, to live more sustainably, more wisely, more respectfully of the natural world. And one can also think of the Olafur Eliasson exhibition taking place right now at the Baylor Foundation in Basel, right? Like that. So an increasing number of artists are working in response to climate change and concerns that have to do with that. So I wanted to give you a chance, the three of you, because we're almost out of time, unbelievably. We just had, you know, we scratched the surface, but here we are. But I did want to give each of you a chance to say one more thing, perhaps a final anecdote about something you didn't have a chance to say yet that had to do with inspiration as happenstance. You know, anything about your art making that you wanted to share that you didn't have time to do yet. And once you do that, we can take some questions. I saw that Yusuf had a question, except now he's lowered his hand again. You still have your hand up, right, Yusuf? Yes, he does. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'll just wait.
All right, but I just wanted to give you a chance to sort of say one more thing if you didn't have the chance to before. Whoever wants to.
Yeah, maybe I just can tell quickly about my serendipity moment. And I have these two, maybe, I don't know if you see this.
Yes, we do.
Okay, these two landscapes. And actually I started with elderberry juice that I produced just for painting. And it started to have this gray color. It's a gray-green, and I thought, okay, that's fine with me. It reacts to this paper. And at one point, I ran out of this juice, and I took the sugared juice, which I wanted to drink. And I tried it out, and it was really a moment of great surprise, because it was the color of this purple, actually, and it stayed. And that's really something with when you're working with natural material, with plant material, you never know how it will turn out. The paper reacts on air. You don't know if you have one different ingredient, that something can change and you can take it or leave it. It's like, okay, I'm going this way or that way. For me, it was really a lucky chance for my work. So that I wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Asta, would you like to say one more thing?
Oh, maybe I think what is interesting, because we have now online panel instead of meeting in real life. And for me, coming across people is very different online than in a real life. And I think because I was very impressed with you, Vlad, having been awake almost 24 hours, but some of these talks this morning were about kind of people coming together and sharing ideas, and I found it very interesting, those dialogues that in some of the talks where they took place, and I brought people to new places. And I think in a university like Webster University, exactly conference like this gives the chance of serendipity. You meet people that are thinking in a different way from you, and that is what art can also do. It can help people to look at things from different perspectives. And I think for a university like Webster, where business and kind of commercial world is very important, it is very crucial for the university to have creative approaches to issues regarding sustainability, where you can really meet the issues more from your heart than from the books that you're reading, and you kind of can find the interest that touches you. And it will, I'm absolutely sure, because you include the conference like this into the curriculum of the students, and it gives the potential for the students to find different audiences and different perspectives that they are not used to work with. And I think this is, and for the last two creativity conferences that I have taken part in at Webster, it is crucial for us to meet people from different sectors. And I just hope that we can meet in real life next year. I think that is maybe my final point.
Thanks, Asta.
May I say something, Asta? I really think it's very important, as you say, that young people learn to be elastic and not have one view, and also try out and go into it, even they fail maybe, because in the artwork you fail first and then you're going away. And I think that's crucial for the process they can learn.
Yeah, I would like to add a slightly different story. I remember listening to a podcast about MIT, and apparently at MIT, the architecture of the building is such, especially the interior, is such that everybody gets lost. And so you have this haphazard clash of people meeting from different departments. So maybe you have a psychology student meeting an engineering student, et cetera. And that kind of happenstance clash is something that's very, very beneficial. So also maybe the way we design our buildings shouldn't be that Cartesian. That maybe takes away from creativity and certainly innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Wise words indeed, James. Thanks. Thanks to all of you. I'd love to take some questions from the audience, starting with Yusuf.
Cool. Hi, thank you so much, everyone. It's been really, really interesting listening to you guys talk. And I just have a question about serendipity in general for anyone who wants to answer. And that is like, is it possible to solely rely on serendipity for your artistic process? Because like, it doesn't feel like a very frequent thing that occurs. And so as an artist, is it sustainable to only, go through an idea and build something when it comes to you? Or, how does what's your process like when there just isn't anything happening and there is no chance involved?
The answer is no.
I think
serendipity is a figurant. It's never the main character. It's a crucial figurant and very rare. Therefore, you have to know the phenomenon. Otherwise, you miss it when it pops up, so to say.
Yeah. So
That's why teaching and learning about serendipity is important, and to know the patterns of serendipity and to know examples. I give you an example of Pablo Picasso. When you go to the Picasso Museum in Paris, above a door, most Parisians, they miss it, you see the saddle of a bicycle with a steer. And Picasso himself, whether the story is true or not, I cannot judge, but what he says, what happened to him is that at a certain moment in his career is Italian word for stone mine, he saw under the walking table a saddle of a bicycle and a steer. And before there was any rational thought, he put the two things together. If you believe what he says, there was no thought about it to combine them. It was just an impulse. So it shows maybe Pablo Picasso was the personification of serendipity. Maybe he made up the story to impress pour épater le bourgeois, like Dali. He also invented stories. Is that an answer? The examples of pure serendipity are very, very rare. In Japan, for example, they like to make ceramics like all over the world. And as you know, when there is a glasure on it, a skin with color on the ceramic, sometimes that evaporates in the oven, and then it goes to the ceiling and it drops down on the ceramic. And in Japan, the ceramic with such a drop is regarded as holy because it shows that chance did play a little role. Am I clear? Serendipity is a footnote in the history of science, but those footnotes are so beautiful. I heard about Cartesian thinking, Descartes. But the most beautiful story of Descartes is almost unknown, even in France. Descartes, when he was young, he earned his money in countries that we now call Holland or Germany. And Descartes was known that he had difficulty to get out of his bed in the morning, like me, but that's the only point I have in common with Descartes. So in his bed, he was already awake, he saw a fly in the corner of his room. And if we believe him, what he told about that anecdote, what happened to him is this: he realized that with three distances from the fly to the ceiling and the two walls, he could make a connection to the world of figures, algebra, and the world of numbers, algebra, and the world of figures, geometry. And if that would have been the only contribution of René Descartes to mathematics, as we call it now, he would have already earned his place in the history of science. I read that in the book of my daughter when she studied psychology. It was a book, Pioneers of Psychology, of the Pioneers of Psychology. But those anecdotes are very, very rare. but they are the salt in as salt in food, so to say. And I think we should know them. And it's not very important whether those stories are true or not, because when it's fiction, they are as instructive as whether they are whether it's not fiction. For example, the apple of Newton, as the Dutch astronomer Oort said, it's not. The question is not whether the story is true about the apple of Newton. The story is so didactic that that story will survive just till the end of times.
Could I interrupt you, please? I really appreciate all this contextual information. I see someone in the panel is raising a hand. And if it's possible for any comments to keep them to a minute of answering, because I know Juliana is very pressed by time. Sorry for that. So coming back to.
I just wanted. Sorry about that, but I just want, maybe Yusuf, I can go to another angle from an artist's view, from my view. I think it's always a balance between consciousness and serendipity. And I think I don't know how Asta and James are working, but when I have some material together and I see the forum, it's also about aesthetics. And I think I also think about the space. Mostly they are white cubes that you're exhibiting or the public sphere, but this is another story. But then you have the white cube, and then you have to be cautious. How are you hanging or installing this work? And that's not anymore about serendipity, that's really about plan. But I think the serendipity happens somewhere in the production of the work, but at one point there is the question of aesthetics.
And maybe to link to that, I highly encourage you, me and Francisca, we will have an exhibition in Basel in coming March, with our research group. And even though some of our works come up as a serendipity, the dialogue between the group, people that you're working with, is very important to kind of share ideas. And I mean, sometimes kind of meeting other people that are kind of thinking like you is very important, but it's also very important to meet people that think differently from you. So it is kind of combination of serendipity and really focused work. And, you know, even though you come up with people have maybe some idea that artists just have a white canvas and start to create work, and then it's complete. And I think it's very, very rare that that happens. Most of the time they are really digging into an idea. And I mean, I think most people that are working within the conceptual art, like both me and Francisca, we use all kinds of methods. We paint and we use video, sound, you know, and, you know, I think as you see in galleries today and you see in exhibitions, but it was a wonderful question, Yusuf. I think what would be very interesting for you and other Webster students is to try to incorporate a visual approach into your work. I don't know what your major is, but use all the opportunities to take the classes from Julianna and kind of to see how can the other students bring through visual material, through visual interpretation, bring in new ideas. And that is very much based on our culture, upbringing, and so many other factors. Do you want to, James, complete with?
To just complement that, serendipity can also be something that germinates. It can be something that is idle for a long time, years, and then something happens and boom, it sets it off. And that can be in the visual arts, and that can be in literature. And so I've noticed that happening to me, and it's something really you don't look for. But there are things that you can do to create, as the panel has mentioned, an environment. And maybe for some it's going to the flea market, for others it's meeting people, or both, etc. That certainly are going to augment your chances to have great serendipitous moments.
Thank you, everyone.
Great question, Yusuf. Look at that. It's 6 p.m. So perfect timing. Look, I'm so happy. My Swiss self is so happy.
Oh
But I do want to thank our panelists. Please, you know, put your information in the chat. I saw Asta did that. I saw James did that. Francisca, if you wanted to share a website so that people could stay in touch with you, so that we could
Sure.
meet you in person at your next vernissage, at your next opening, that would be great. And I want to thank you again. And I see our next speaker, our keynote speaker is